All right, beautiful people. Making sure everything is squared away before I get started. Give me a second. Making sure everything is squared away before I get started. All right, y'all. So if y'all don't know what you're here for, baby, let me show you. Barack Obama and the Jim Crow media. The Return of the Nigger Breakers by Mr. Ishmael Green. Mr. Ishmael Reed, my apologies, y'all. This is the fine gentleman right here. If I can get that glare to go away. And we're doing the read aloud, man. Now, I just want to let y'all know, if y'all have not been following along, in the live previous to this, there are other chapter readings. You can start at the very first chapter. That link is in the description. I did not put every single link in the description for every chapter reading because I just didn't. I apologize if that was what you were expecting of me. I'll consider going through and doing that later on. But a little housekeeping, while we are here, I have to show y'all, what I got going on. Okay, so let me show you. But I would like y'all to follow me, subscribe over at The Antithetical Antagonist. This is my other YouTube channel. This is where I talk about topics that are more thought-provoking heavy. Here, I might dib-a-dabble on it, but as you see, you get more of an eclectic, oversight of who I am. You find all types of content on Obdurately, which is just basically means, it's kind of like when people be like, I'm unapologetically me. Obdurately is basically saying the same thing. I'm me. This is what you get. And I hope you accept it because if you don't, it doesn't matter. This is what's happening. But at the end of the day, The Antithetical Antagonist, this is a platform where you can find interviews that I do with average people, everyday people. I am in the process of editing some videos, so you will see some videos posted. An interview that I have with one of my older cousins. She is 77, 78 years old, discussing her experiences growing up in life and just giving you, overlook on what's going on in the world, what has happened in the world, to provide some historical context as to how we got to where we are today, because you can't get there without the historical, stories coming out of the ancestors' mouth. She's one of the ancestors. She's just alive. You know what I'm saying? I also have interviews here with my brother, who is Michael Myers of New York. You see what I'm saying? I got some interviews there. I also have an interview coming up. Phoebe, he's an artist here in Rochester, New York. That interview is being edited currently, and it'll be posted here. But I also have an interview with Mr. Jalen Johnson, who discussed his experiences within the criminal justice system. You see what I'm saying? But I also have some encouraging content here that you can find with my sister, my mom, and other people in the community. You see what I'm saying? So this is what I mean by this ain't your, I perform interviews by your everyday people. You see what I'm saying? My sister, my mama, kinfolk, people I know in my community, people that has had experiences that are similar to other people's experiences out in the world. You see what I'm saying? So if you want to check out that content, please come and stop by right here. The Antithetical Antagonist. Okay? Subscribe, man. And then I have another platform, Tier the Athlete. This is where you can find my athletic content. Okay? As you can see, Athletic content. I love Jesus. I'm a sinner. Okay. A saint is just a sinner who fell multiple times and just continue to get up. We're supposed to. Fall 7 times, get back up. Okay? But you can find that content here. All types of content. Bowling, range shooting, archery, hunting season is around the corner. So you can find that. Me preparing for that because I will be practicing archery because I'm getting ready for that bow hunting with that wild game. So now that I got that out of the way, the housekeeping, just make sure y'all come check me out. The antithetical antagonist. I don't know why I'm having a tongue tie over here all of a sudden. The antithetical antagonist, as well as Tierra the athlete, and obviously where you found me, right here on Obdurately T. So without any further ado, because we done 6 minutes in on the introduction, we're gonna get into this video. We reading this book, man. Barack Obama and the Jim Crow Media: The Return of the Nigger Breakers by Ishmael Reed. We are on I believe the second to last chapter. Okay. After this chapter, there's the afterword. I'm going to include it because he wrote it like a chapter. So it is what it is. You see what I'm saying? But without further ado, let's get into this book reading. And make sure y'all comment your thoughts, your opinions about what you hear in this book, because some of the topics you may be newly acquainted to. Some of it you might have an antiquated relationship with it. It's okay. It's okay. We're a community. We're just going to chit chat amongst one another, all right? So let's go. From jubilation at election night to cries of kill him. To cries of kill him. AOL, September 30th, 2009. White supremacists and neo-Nazis have committed violence against African Americans around the country and fomented hate online for years. But in recent weeks, anti-Obama speech and behavior hinting at or advocating violence has surfaced at so-called town hall meetings and demonstrations against Obama's healthcare plan and other policies. Now, mind you, this book was written, I'm not really sure when it was written, but it was published 2009, 2010. So it's in the midst of Obama's, first presidency? So this is why it's so heavy around topics about Barack Obama, just in case y'all wonder, because you're like, Donald Trump is the president currently. We know. Book. Anyways. The same has happened at forums frequented by fringe groups, including birthers who dispute Obama's U.S. citizenship. In August, the Secret Service investigated a man who displayed a sign reading "Death to Obama" and "Death to Michelle and her 2 stupid kids" outside a town hall meeting in Maryland. And in New Hampshire, a man brought a holstered gun and stood across the street from a presidential town hall with his weapon on full display, according to ABC News. And just last month, a North Carolina man pleaded guilty to threatening the president after he called 911 twice from his trailer just south of the Virginia border, saying he was going to assassinate the president. The AP reported. Interesting. I wonder what was the results of that arrest. Did it result in a conviction, dismissal? Who was the guy? Was it one of them psyops, psychological operations pushed by the government? Who knows? The election of Barack Obama was a cause for celebration in November, but by September 2009, there was a real worry in the country about whether the president would live out his term. The Boston Globe pointed to the media's role in creating the atmosphere in which the assassination of the president might be committed by a deranged individual, or as in the case of JFK and MLK, a conspiracy. We just love conspiracies, don't we? September 2009 was typical. A poll conducted by a juvenile appearing on Facebook asked whether Obama should be killed. A writer for Newsmax.com, a site with connections with the Republican Party, called for a military coup against the president. Newsmax also distributed Sarah Palin's Going Rogue, a book that received almost round-the-clock coverage by the media beginning on November 15th. On John King's State of the Union from CNN, where the ex-vice presidential candidate, Sarah Palin, was treated as a serious candidate for president come 2012, Barack Obama was ridiculed for bowing before the Emperor of Japan, with William Bennett leading the panel's condemnation, without mentioning that President Eisenhower had bowed before General de Gaulle and that Richard Nixon had shown the same expression before Emperor Hirohito, who was the Emperor of Japan when Japan was regarded as an enemy nation. Interesting. Richard Nixon, the one who started a lot of the mayhem that we see today. Let's continue. During the week, film and photos surfaced showing George Bush II holding hands with Saudi princes. Why didn't John King mention these other bows when moderating a discussion about Obama's bow before the Emperor of Japan? A renaissance that sometimes might receive 1,000 hits in a day if we're lucky. It's managed by my youngest daughter. I sometimes fantasize about how formidable an outfit I would have were I to own the same kind of resources as the mainstream media. I would ask a member of my large staff, no intern could do the job, before going on to lead a discussion about Obama's bowing before the Japanese emperor. Hey, go find whether any other president has bowed before a head of state or royalty. And while you're at it, get me a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Was King lazy, or was he instructed to treat Obama's bowing as entertainment? I watched John King asking a panel about Barack Obama while waiting for a plane at the airport in Minneapolis. Some white hunters of the sort who journey into Minnesota during deer season were also watching. I could tell what they were thinking. Even though the majority of the public, 67%, including the majority of Republicans, saw nothing wrong with the president's bowing, the media carried the controversy into the last week of November. Other shows also took up Obama's bowing while treating Sarah Palin as a serious person. Mike Malloy was right when he said that while only 9% of the public said that they'd vote for Palin if she ran for president, she has powerful constituency, the media. Malloy said that Palin's appeal was her hot ASS, Air America, November 19th. And Jessica Yellen, one of King's panelists, called her a sex pot. And as if to prove their descriptions, Palin appeared on the cover of Newsweek as a sort of Playboy centerfold model with clothes. This cheesy flesh shot caused outrage amongst her followers, who would be at a loss if you were to ask them to spell one of their buzzwords like Constitution. Yet, she posed for the photo. None of the cable networks, who reduced the president's historic trip to China and Japan to a photo to prove that he wasn't as manly as 5 deferment and 2 DUI Cheney, reported that the career of Sarah Palin's ghostwriter, Gawker, did. Lynn Vincent, the woman who is writing a book called Going Rogue by Sarah Palin, sure could pick her co-writers. She's written books before with a general who kills demons for God and a guy who finds interracial dating revolting. As Charles Johnson, whose ongoing reformation from Muslim-hating wacko to right-wing apostate continues to puzzle and delight us, points out, Palin's ghostwriter's previous work includes Donkey Kongs, a thoughtful investigative look at the democratic criminality that blows the lid off that killer and traitor, Aaron Burr. Vincent's co-writer on Donkey Kongs was Robert Stacy McCain, a former Washington Times editor who writes things like this. The media now face interracial images into the public mind, and a number of perfectly rational people react to these images with an altogether natural revulsion. The white person who does not mind transacting business with a black bank clerk may yet be averse to accepting the clerk as his sister-in-law. And this is not racism. no matter what Madison Avenue, Hollywood, and Washington tells us. That was from a private email McCain once wrote that a recipient posted online. So in his defense, McCain, no relation to Palin's running mate, wouldn't write something like that in public. In public, he says things like slaves and whites in the Old South had cordial and affectionate relations, as is a member of the League of the South, which wants to secede from the Union again, and writes for a website called VDare, which proudly publishes the work of rational and civil white nationalists who unashamedly work for their people. While playing down Federal Reserve Ben Bernanke's claim issued during the week that Obama and his team had helped the country to avoid depression, cable continued to cover a candidate whose dangerous rhetoric continues to ramp up death threats against the president. On November 16, 2009, the Christian Science Monitor reported an escalation of threats against the president's life. There's a new slogan making its way onto our cars' bumpers and across the internet. It read simply, "Pray for Obama," Psalms 109, verse 8. A nice sentiment, maybe not. The psalm reads, "Let his days be few and let another take his office." Presidential criticism, though witty slogans, is nothing new. Bumper stickers, t-shirts, and hats with 12009 commemorated President Bush's last day in office. But the verse immediately following the psalm referenced is a bit more ominous. Let his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. Now, what's interesting to me, interestingly, there's this quarrel between George Bush #2, Jr., and his cousin, Barack Obama, where he's talking about may his children be fatherless. And he's painting this feud about he's in enmity with Barack Obama. Now, I don't know concretely, I can speculate here, but I don't know concretely whether the dude is sitting here race baiting folks, playing this white versus black. I mean, that is how his daddy got into office, George Bush Sr., race baiting people, where miraculously Willie Horton was released from prison, a person whom on paper nobody in their right mind would have released, regardless of your race, your gender, your motherfucking background religiously, your educational background. Nobody in their right mind would have released this man. Nobody in their right natural mind would have released this man. Jesus died on Calvary for this dude. Humans, however, ain't got time for him. You see what I'm saying? But miraculously, Willie Horton was released from prison in 1988 when Michael Dukakis was winning the presidential election against George Bush Sr. And Michael Dukakis was, he was advocating furlough programs. He was the one that sat here and said, like, hey, just because you're incarcerated, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have, the ability to see your family members, maybe on the weekends, maybe on holidays. We'll set some arrangements up so that way you can spend time with your family members, because prison is supposed to be rehabilitative, right? Right? Or is it decapacitating? I forget. Sarcasm. Supposed to be rehabilitative. Furlough programs was involved. Education opportunities was involved. People were allowed to get their high school diplomas, GEDs. You was even allowed secondary education, higher education. You could get minimal, like an associate's degree, an associate's college degree while in prison. The conditions were terrible. Wasn't equivalently terrible as today, but it was terrible. But you had more access to things. I mean, it was painted as to fix your life because you are this troubled pauper who is indigent. You don't have no support system. You poor as a joke. You ain't got a pot to piss in. You need help. Let's help you get better in life so you're not returning to the same life. Stealing, whoremongering, gambling, fornicating, committing adultery, because whether people really realize it or not, that is illegal in just about every state. Now, is it enforced? That's a whole nother question. But it is illegal, adultery, just like sodomy. But a lot of people is going in the back door. So, but you got in some southern states where they actually enforcing the sodomy laws. So there's that. But anyways, George Bush won against Dukakis because he released Willie Horton, who's a black man. Media, because we always talking about this demonizing media who loves to perpetuate all types of stereotypes. Racial, gender-based, your citizenship status or lack thereof, educational background. You know what I'm saying? The fact of the matter is that most people presume most criminals to be some poor person, a blue-collar criminal. Overlook the fact that white-collar criminality exists, but they don't get the same notoriety. Why? Because they can buy their way out. The only reason why poor people go to jail and prison is because they can't afford to avoid it. The Sackler family, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, Jeffrey Epstein, the Maxwell family. All these rich people just evade incarceration, while poor people just get locked up. Why? Why? Money. Like the Bible says, the rich has many friends, but the poor has none. I always thought it was asinine. When I was poor as a joke and I had bad credit, these niggas was motherfucking giving me higher interest rate than I do as a person with pretty decent credit. As a person who's a little bit more financial off than I was when I was like 22. Makes no sense to me to motherfucking give a broke person high interest rate, expect me to pay it back when I ain't got, nigga, I wouldn't be borrowing from you if I had it. But the people who can afford it, they get all this help, welfare, handouts. They benefit from affirmative action. I mean, most people don't even realize. I mean, we see it. In this book, Affirmative Action Around the World, is an empirical study by Thomas Sowell. That no matter where you look at in the world, affirmative action, although initially was constructed and implemented to benefit the disenfranchised, the people who've been colonized, abused, and scorned, talked about, show as you're born, Miss Vicky Winans. Yeah, it starts off as it's for them, and then ultimately it results in just something that benefits affluent people who has the means to do without all this extra help, without all the handouts. It's ironic, huh? To me it is. Going back to George Bush, we can't expect much from number two when number one released Willie Horton, got that nigga released from prison. Nobody in their right mind would have released him. This dude come out of all the people he could have raped and abused, he go and find some lily white lady. Willie Horton and his black body rape and abuse this lily white lady. Turn around and abuse her lily white boyfriend. Now, motherfucking George Bush is sitting here saying, this is what you want as a president? These niggas is soft on crime. Look at this. They released Willie Horton from prison. Then the media take already dark chocolate Willie Brown Horton, and then they make this nigga look spooky black so he could look all extra demonic and appeal to the white anxiety. You know what I'm saying? They gotta amp you up, white people with fear. Oh my goodness, look at this white lady and her white man, who they painted as metrosexual, by the way. got ravaged by this black man. Remember, we've always been telling y'all that the black man, you can't trust him. He will run up in your house. He'll rape your wives, your children, and then turn around and rape the man of the house. That's what these weirdos been preaching for that long. And then they painted it and plastered it all over the social media. And then was like, this is who you want as your president? Dukakis released him. And Michael Dukakis lost the 1988 presidential election to George Bush, #1. Numero uno. Lost. And then that's when the whole flip happened. 4 years later, 1992 rolled around, the year that I was born. Bill Clinton comes out. Democrats, the liberal folk, the blue people, they don't want to seem, the progressives, they don't want to seem soft on crime. So now they like, hold on. We tough on crime. Vote for me. And I'll do XYZ with the police, run up in these black communities, throw them in the prison, throw them in some pink panties. I'll emasculate them. Make them feel low about themselves. And then turn around and reap the benefits off of monopolizing and capitalizing off of them while they get paid for nothing. Why? Because the 13th Amendment permits slavery. Remember that same thing that we supposedly abolished, that we technically just revisioned and repackaged as incarceration. Yeah. We'll throw them in there. All you got to do is vote for me. Next thing you know, people vote for him. Motherfucking Bill Clinton. And now, crime bill comes into play. It's crazy how that works out, man. Crazy how that works out. Anyways, let's continue. Some white hunters of the sort who journey into Minnesota during deer season were also watching. I could tell that they were thinking, even though the majority of the public, 67%, including the majority of Republicans, saw nothing wrong with the president's bowing, the media carried the controversy into the last week of November. Other shows also took up Obama's bowing while treating Sarah Palin as a serious person. We read this already. So we're going to go to where we left off when they talk about Donkey Kongs. The media now force interracial images into the public mind, which is words from Vincent's co-writer, Robert Stacey McCain, a former Washington Times editor who write things like this. The media now force interracial images into the public mind, and a number of perfectly rational people react to these images with an altogether natural revulsion. The white person who does not mind transacting business with a black bank clerk may yet be averse to accepting the clerk as his sister-in-law. And this is not racism. No matter what Madison Avenue, Hollywood, and Washington tells us. That was from a private email McCain once wrote that was a recipient posted online. That he once wrote a recipient posted online. So in his defense, McCain, no relation to Palin's running mate, wouldn't write something like that in public. In public, he says things like slaves and whites in the Old South had cordial and affectionate relationships and is a member of the League of the South, which wants to secede from the Union again, and writes for a website called VDare, which proudly publishes the work of rational and civil white nationalists who unashamedly work for their people. While playing down Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke's claim issued during the week that Obama and his team had helped the country to avoid depression, cable continued to cover a candidate whose dangerous rhetoric continues to ramp up death threats against the president. On November 16, 2009, the Christian Science Monitor reported an escalation of threats against the president's life. There's a new slogan making its way onto car bumpers and across the internet. It reads simply, "Pray for Obama," Psalms 109:8. Now, that's a nice sentiment, is it? Maybe not. The psalm reads, "Let his days be few let another take his office. Presidential criticisms through witty slogans is nothing new. Bumper stickers, t-shirts, and hats with 12009 commemorated President Bush's last day in office. But the verse immediately following the psalm referenced is a bit more ominous. Let his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. Now, do I believe that that's what Bush really believed? No. No. But let's continue. Ooh, excuse me, I ain't trying to burp in the microphone. By the beginning of winter, it was obvious that the media had become a sort of white power government in exile, ready to pounce upon any of the young black president's missteps. Not only predictable outlets like Fox News, which Obama's advisor David Axelrod on Sunday, October 18, 2009, defined as less a news organization than an arm of the Republican Party, but from progressive outlets like Pacifica, which had begun to view gay marriage as a civil rights issue of the period, thereby accepting the post-race thinking that racism was no longer an issue in American life, and when blacks suggested that it was, they were playing the race card or making excuses, which was the line promoted by entertainment sideshows like CNN's Black in America or Saving Our Children. So powerful was the media that the titular head of the Republican Party was not a politician, but a talk show host with a history of drug abuse and making outlandish and racially tinged remarks about the president. It's appropriate that the party of family values, which reached its height of power with the election of a man who contributed to the conception of a child while unmarried and whose 2008 vice presidential candidate was part of a family immersed in a tangle of social pathologies, beheaded by a talk show host who in the past has had a drug problem. During this period, it was revealed that Ayn Rand, the goddess of right-wing American politics, was a crank addict, Lordy B. None of this seems to matter to media financed by multinationals that curb any discussion of the hypocrisy of those who perform on behalf of its message. David Brock says that his homosexuality didn't matter to the Republican homophobes as long as he used his brilliance to promote their talking points. It's kind of like Candace Owens. Her blackness wasn't a problem as long as she disparaged and demonized black people. And then separated herself from them. As if she was like this outlier. I think that they call those tokens, right? I think so. Yeah, something like that. Anyways, while Obama is the nation's first rainbow president put in high office by a coalition of white, black, Latino, Asian, and Native American men and women, the opposition is no longer a political one, but a sort of multinational owned electronic government in exile, which dictates the actions of the conservative and right-wing politicians who cower before it. First, they challenged the stimulus bill, the aim of which was to keep public servants like the police, firemen, and teachers on the job. On October 30th, 2009, it was announced that the stimulus had created and maintained more than 640,000 jobs, 110,000 in California alone. On August 10th, 2009, Paul Krugman, who had been media-appointed prime minister of a government in exile headed by Rush Limbaugh, wrote in New York Times, "So it seems that we aren't going to have a second Great Depression after all. What saved us? The answer, basically, is big government." When Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski on the Morning Joe challenged a wonkish recital by Senator Jack Reed about the bill and were rebuffed, they brought in a backup commentator, Jack Welch, the former owner of General Electric, to provide an open-ended rebuttal to Reed. I needn't remind anyone that MSNBC is owned by General Electric. Conflict of interest, eh? As of this writing, they're trying to sell it. Welch is the industry captain who noticed while visiting India that labor there was cheaper than United States labor. First, there was chatter about Obama's bad beginning. Neocon David Forum said that it was disastrous. Over at CNN, Wolf Blitzer was even suggesting that Obama administration might be over before it began. Paul Krugman was brought on to trash Obama's economic policies. This is the Clinton supporter who said in February 2008 that Obama's followers were members of a venomous cult of personality. The cover of Newsweek had a photo of Krugman above the caption, "Obama is wrong." By October 2009, Krugman was defending Obama's economic policies from the judgment of George Will and Peggy Noonan, who had become famous by coining the phrase, "1,000 points of light." Pat Buchanan, who migrates from panel to panel on MSNBC to deliver comments that are proven wrong, said that if Obama was nominated, the Republican Party will rip him to pieces. When the market displayed a slump during the early days of the administration, he said that the market was sending Obama a message. Watching this hand-wringing over the Obama administration, which was marked as doom even before it begun, one was reminded that not only did media moguls like Rupert Murdoch, who donated $25,000 to right-wing sock puppet Ward Connerly's anti-affirmative action drive, own the media but finance the think tanks from which the media draws some of their commentators. And so the morning after the stimulus bill passed, representatives from the Wall Street Journal and the right-wing Cato Institute spent 3 hours trashing the stimulus package while rehearsed right-wing callers accused Obama of promoting socialism. Like a mob trampling over one another as the doors opened for an Xmas sale, it was a consensus among outlets as diverse as the Daily Beast and Fox News that the first week of February 2009 was Obama's bad week. How did the public feel about the media described as Obama's bad week? The Post gave him high ratings. Gallup was 69%, CBS 79%, CNN 6 out of 10, about 60%, gave him high ratings. McClatchy Ipsos 69%. Of course, these approval ratings will fluctuate, but it was clear during this week who or where was the source of Obama's opposition. While he might head the executive branch of government, his wealthy enemies whose profits he wishes to diminish and who represents a tiny fraction of public opinion are able to magnify that tiny fraction through their ownership of the American media. Sounds about right. Sounds about right. The wealthy is such a small percentage, yet they make the most noise because they have access to the most resources. They have control over the most resources. In addition to the fact that, well, when you are the power machine, who can compete against you except Jesus Christ himself? You see what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, they are the media. They are the people who are pushing out the narratives. They're the people that push out the news. They're the people that push out every aspect of entertainment. It's kind of like the music industry, or not even just the music industry, the people that's trying to blow up on social media, period, like TikTok, Instagram. Right? People say that it's hard to blow up because you're competing with such a heavily inundated system, which is like, yeah, to some degree. But in my opinion, the bulk of that system that you're competing with is the bulk that constantly pushes the same type of content on your algorithms. We see the same big personalities, whether they're just social media personalities, or even if they're personalities in the sense of like celebrities, music producers, music artists, actors, all this other stuff, right? They have the ability to control the system because they are the system. They fund the system. They create the system. And then if they don't like it because they have the funding, they can buy it. I recently, yesterday, watched with my wife, Devil Wears Prada 2. And I wasn't really bought by the nostalgic aspect of the movie, but I like to watch stuff for like knowledge. And I learned a lot watching that movie, where it's like I saw where, what is it? The runway, right? They were losing steam. The owner of it died. Motherfreaking, I'm killing the movie here, so spoiler alert. But the owner of the runway dies. It gets passed to his son. They're scared, you know, and when I say they, is all of them, including Miranda, but she tries to act like the G. But they're all kind of, you know, cautious about what's going to happen next with the new, you know, leadership rolling in. It's being under new management. Then the main chick, she concocts this plan to have one of her old homies, Emily, buy the building. She buys the building. She completely is about to change it. She's like, I'm taking over world domination. And then they end up going to another lady and have her buy it just so they can have control of, you know, like the content, so they can have creative control, basically. And they ultimately got it into the hands of someone who was able to buy it, who gave them more freedom. But the thing that I learned from it was like, okay, if you don't own it, you just a worker. So if management takes over, you lose your job. You hope to God that it gets in the hands of somebody who cares more about the people working and more about the content, and not trying to change things. You know what I'm saying? It's the traditionalists versus, like, I guess, like the progressive people, right? And so I started to see, like, if it wasn't for them buying it and taking over and giving them creative control, these people would have lost it all. And that's how these people are with the government. It's like the people that run the media, the people that runs the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, what have you. These are the people who control every aspect of it. And the people at the bottom, we are just the motherfucking patrons. We have little to no say in the operations because we're not the ones that controls it. The people that controls it are the ones that they depict on what the operations is going to be like, how it benefits us, if we get anything out of it, pay, what have you, all that other stuff. And if it's in the hands of somebody that wants to just do things it may not benefit you. That's how the politics is ran. That's how the entertainment industry is ran. Whether you looking at sports, music, motherfreaking the acting realm, it's all the same. People sit here and make it seem like oligarchs is somebody separate than the politicians. Let me tell you something. A political position is a job for the wealthy. Poor people don't get these jobs. Poor people get sanitation jobs, housekeeping jobs, janitorial jobs. You get to be the police, you know, asset protection. We'll razzle and dazzle your job description with a little high paid salary according to you. But the police ain't nothing but high paid asset protection. Okay? You get the jobs like nursing. You deal with all the dirty, disgusting stuff. Bloody people, niggas with knots on their heads, skin falling off, MRSA. You deal with that. We deal with more of the administrative stuff that controls every aspect of your life. Social, political. That's pretty much the only two. Everything else fall under them two umbrellas. But if you know, to make you feel better, to titillate you a little bit, educational, financial, you know, religious. But they control every aspect. It's the rich people's job. I know I ain't the only one that saw that TV show Succession. When that rich nigga son was getting on his nerves talking about, Daddy, I want to be a president. He was like, nigga, get out my face with this stupid job, okay? Leave that to somebody else with a little bit more brains than you. But as for the poorer batch of us rich folk, I got something else for you. Come along, retard. Come on. That's how nigga was talking to his son. They be telling us what they do, how they operate, and everything. When I say they, I'm talking about the niggas in power, which is usually niggas with money. Because if you look at the way that the political realm is made up, most of these politicians are either A, business people, businessmen and women, or B, lawyers. And I should have put lawyers as A because most of them niggas is lawyers. Secondly, business people. Because if they don't have business savvy, then they are motherfreaking, they are Nepo babies. They are daughters of some wealthy nigga that was like, you know what? Business ain't your acumen, it's mine, but I'm going to need some legal help. So you're going to law school. It's the rich people that controls our lives. Why do you think there's this false sense of constitutional protections? Oh my gosh, we're protected against government invasion. Wonderful. Now, how does that work when it's the private field that's invading on your constitutional rights? Oh, wait. The Constitution doesn't provide safeguards against the private realm. In fact, it strengthens the private realm. Oh my gosh, it's so interesting how that turns out. Let's continue reading. Jesus. It's a set plan, man. We all in the motherfucking algorithm together. We all in the matrix together. Let me figure out where I left off, y'all, so I ain't over here rereading stuff that I already read. Okay. Right, we left off on. Of course, the approval ratings would fluctuate, but it was clear during this week who or where was the source of Obama's opposition. While he might head the executive branch of government, his wealthy enemies, whose profits, the rich has many friends, but the poor has none. That's in the Bible. Google a scripture. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's somewhere in the New Testament. His wealthy enemies, whose profit he wishes to diminish and who represent a tiny fraction. The wealthy niggas make up a tiny fraction of the population, less than 1%, but they so motherfucking loud because they own everything. Who represent a tiny fraction of public opinion, yet they are able to magnify that tiny fraction through their ownership of the American media. And then they get us Stockholm Syndrome babies to do their bidding. Now they're using us like minions, fighting their wars, doing their bidding, when whole time they done painted this facade about the American dream and how you can achieve it with some hard work. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Put a little merit forth. You'll get there. And this false sense of, I'll get there if I just pull myself up by my bootstraps. Just put my head down and work hard. Now you advocating for your own oppression and your own yoke binding. Because you motherfreaking defending these rich niggas' position. Just all for the hopes that someday, all that loss of circulation from you pulling yourself up by your bootstraps will motherfreak pay off. Yet the day. If that's not retarded, baby, what is it? Stockholm Syndrome babies. That's the best I could come up with. I was there with you. But the great Lord above removed the scales from my eyes, and I pray that he removes them from yours too. Can I get an amen, Yahweh? Let's continue, guys. Anyways. At the same time, Howard Kurtz and others will deny that this is happening. They will continue to claim that the media are being seduced by Obama. So now we have a situation where the media decides the outcome of elections. Oh, riddle me that. Here we are, 17 years later, 2026. Media still controls who motherfucking wins. McCain said that there were his constituency decide the outcome of trials before the accused has set foot inside of a courtroom and behave as a sort of a government in exile. Something has changed in American politics when a pill-popping talk show host has become the head of a family values political party. Can I get an amen? Amen. It's a bunch of sinners out here condemning other sinners, telling us that our poop stink like theirs don't. But in comparison to some of the fulminating rising of the from the margins, which was given tacit approval from the Republican Party, Limbaug's entertaining rants about the president were mild and, of course, given attention from the ratings-hungry media. Those voices from the fringes were given round-the-clock treatment by cable. Lord have mercy. It's crazy. It's crazy. This book was published in 2009, 10-ish. 17, 16 years later, here we are with the same dilemma. Anyways. Much of the hatred was fueled by Sarah Palin, whose speeches inspired shouts of "kill him" and "nigger" from her crowds. By the fall of 2009, a writer for Newsmax was wondering aloud about a military coup in the Boston Globe in a chilling report as whether the Secret Service was capable of protecting the president and his family. Not if the Secret Service is in on it. Under the headline, "Obama Risks a Domestic Military Intervention," John L. Perry wrote, "Imagine a bloodless coup to restore and defend the Constitution through an interim administration that would do the serious business of governing and defending the nation. Skilled, military-trained nation builders would replace accountability-challenged radical left commissars. Having bonded with his twin teleprompters, the president would be detailed for ceremonial speech-making." A poll of New Jersey voters revealed that 12% believed that Obama was the Antichrist, and a large percentage of Republicans still maintained that he was born in Kenya. Nigga, I believe the nigga was born in Kenya, okay? There's a lot of funny business that be going on in the government, okay? Them niggas don't tell us everything. Psychological operations be happening every day. Niggas told us Charlie Kirk is dead. This nigga walking around today. It's clips of him dressed up as like Secret Services and trash. He's in like police military uniform or something. Niggas talk about Jeffrey Epstein dead. This nigga walking around talking about some Palm Beach Pete. These niggas really try to convince us that what we see is not what we see. It's not real. They're telling us lies are truths and truths are lies. Yeah. They're telling you don't rely on your own senses. The good senses that, ain't none good but the Father. But they're telling you not to rely on the senses that the good Lord has given us. Sound like the Marine Corps, the military. They expect you to just erase 17 plus years of your life in a matter of 3 months of military programming. I'm not a robot. Oh my goodness. Let's continue, guys, because how many pages we got left, Jesus? A good bit. Let's go. Where we left off? I think we left off killing his family. Yeah, they talking about Secret Service was capable of protecting his family if they're not a part of it. Under the headline, "Obama Risks a Domestic Military Intervention," John L. Perry wrote, "Imagine a bloodless coup." I've heard that. As usual, the corporate media was designing an America that was markedly different from the one that was reflected by the polls. Appearing on Morning Joe, a reporter from Rolling Stone, who unmasked the influence upon the town halls of the insurance companies, which spent $380 million in their effort to derail the health plan's public option, which was challenged by Pat Buchanan, who still maintains that his boss, Richard Nixon, was wronged, and Canadian-born millionaire Mort Zuckerman. Buchanan and Zuckerman insisted that the corporate manipulated town hall meetings and the 9/12 Washington demonstrations organized by teabaggers were genuine and reflected the mood of the country, which was anti-big government. However, Max Blumenthal, a Nation contributor, interviewed some of the marchers. He discovered that they were ignorant of the issues and many didn't know why they were even there. That happens quite often with not only the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party. I don't know where you be finding these people that just be hopping on y'all bandwagons all willy-nilly. You need to send them back. I really think they come out of the psychological operations bowl. You know what I'm saying? They be rolling about an Area 151 or Area 151, Area 51. But these niggas be rolling about it somewhere. I don't know where y'all find these people. I don't think they really exist amongst us Americans. But if they do, nigga, you gonna have to show me. Cause, where y'all getting these people? Where? I know being ill-advised and uneducated could get you in some devilish places. I mean, even the Bible says, for my people perish for lack of knowledge. Just saying. If lack of knowledge could lend you perishing. Let's continue. We got some pages to get through, y'all. Anyways. Zuckerman, who has been very critical of Obama, turned up later on Lou Dobbs' show on CNN to criticize Obama for his attempt to have the Olympic Games in Chicago. His black employee, Errol Lewis of the Daily News, who survived the purge of black reporters that occurred when Zuckerman took over, must have been that, you know what I'm saying? They be doing that in the Marine Corps too. That's how them niggas be making it to retirement. I'm just saying, you can't make it to retirement without just taking a mouthful of the babies, you know? Anyways. Amazingly, Lewis poses as a progressive on Air America affiliate WWRL 1600. So insisting on Obama's failure, the staff at Murdoch's The Weekly Standard erupted into cheers when it was announced that the Olympics would not be held in the United States. The Weekly Standard had been recently purchased by a Christian fundamentalist billionaire named, oh my goodness, Christian fundamentalist. What the freak is even that? I just want y'all to know, for the ignorant in the back, Jesus ain't with these denominations. Like, if the Bible says if you are for him, then you're not against him. What is with all the denominations? Riddle me that. Let's continue. We got some pages to get through. Anyways, this Christian fundamentalist billionaire named Phil Anschutz, who makes his money in oil and real estate, when Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize and NPR, in the midst of firing some of its black personnel, brought on a Weekly Standard contributor to denounce the Nobel Prize Committee for awarding Obama the prize, lending credence to Kofi Ntambu's lack of confidence in NPR. So dire was the firing of blacks at NPR, which receives public funds, which include black people, that the National Association of Black Journalists sent a letter. Not the black bourgeoisie. All right, let's see what they said. If Obama or members of his family are harmed, the same media that encouraged and, in the case of Fox News, helped to organize the teabaggers will argue that with his policies, he brought it on himself. They probably will say that. As I predicted, when asked to comment on his election by the Oakland Tribune, Obama is a centrist and two, the right on some issues, but the infotainment media have cast him as a radical, a socialist, a Marxist, and a Muslim, who were all parts of him born in Kenya. The majority, 47 economists polled by the Wall Street Journal, agree that a recovery is underway, and even Paul Krugman, who had been appointed the president's rival, appearing on This Week's in October, gave the president some faint praise, and while doing so, revealed his fellow panelists ignorant about the subject of economics. They were Peggy Noonan and George Will. On October 13, 2009, the Oakland Tribune reported a survey conducted by the National Association for Business Economics that 80% of economics believe that the recession is over and an expansion had begun, but they expect the recovery will be slow as worries over unemployment and high federal debt persist. Now, by October 30th, Barack Obama and his team has saved the country from a depression, yet so pathological is white supremacy that the threats against his life have increased by 400%. If any harm comes to him, the same media that are creating an atmosphere where such a deed is possible will blame the president. They'll give him some of the tough love that he and his fellow Harvard elite deal to blacks. They'll say that because of his Marxist leanings, he brought it on himself. Blaming the victim is nothing new in American history. It sure ain't. Francis Parkman, who has been called the greatest of American historians, blamed the seizure of Indian lands and the extermination of some Indian tribes on the Indians. He said the Indians melted away, not because civilization destroyed them, but because their own ferocity and intractable indolence made it impossible that they should exist in its presence. Sound familiar? Yes. Yeah, it does. It sounds exactly similar to the same rhetoric that has been perpetuated about black people. That's why I believe that the true indigenous Indians to Americas, from Canada down to South America, are us Negroes, because the treatment done to Indians has been equivalent to the treatment done to black people non-stop. The only thing is that y'all keep recategorizing us as different names over along the way to cause confusion through your obfuscation. That's it. Let's continue. Blaming the victim is nothing new in America. Sure ain't. Francis Parkman, who has been called the greatest of American historians, blamed the seizure of Indian lands and extermination of some Indian tribes on the Indians. He said the Indians melted away not because civilization destroyed them, but because their own ferocity and intractable indolence made it impossible that they should exist in its presence. Sound familiar? The cynical minds who serve the shareholders of NBC, CNN, and Fox, all the three acronyms, have used this explanation to make big bucks with little investment on their part. Only the Indians have become blacks and Latinos. Noticing that CNN got high ratings from its Blame the Victim stunt, Black in America, MSNBC teamed Bill Cosby up with Michelle Bernard, a higher black mouth for the far right, who, following the neocon line and prompted by her funders, says the personal responsibility is a problem peculiar to black men. Oh my goodness, Bill Cosby teamed up with these people to demonize black men, the same black men who ran to Bill Cosby rescue when he was accused of drugging and raping all those white women, them whitey women. Interesting. It's crazy. It's the same black men that they said synonymously in high numbers vote Democrat, yet simultaneously voted for Donald Trump, which bear the weight of majority of the blame for Donald Trump winning his second election. It's interesting how that works. Explain me that math, because my mind just does not comprehend. Let's continue, because we got some pages to get through, guys. Anyways, MSNBC teamed with Bill Cosby and Michelle Bernard, a hired black mouth for the far right, who, following the neocon line and prompted by her funders, said that personal responsibility is a problem. Peculiar, meaning far removed from black men. She's also a global warming denier and believes that we should go easy on the rich because, after all, they are creating all of the wealth, according to her. And there's a lot of people, poor people, who are going easy on the wealth for that and many other reasons that are just retarded. Crazy. Absurd to me. But let's continue. She is one of those who are spreading lies about Obama's health proposals. Bernard, president and CEO of the far-right funded Independent Women's Forum, has written, "More American women are going to die of breast cancer if you and I surrender to President Obama's nationalized health care onslaught." More American women are going to die of breast cancer if you and I surrender to President Obama's nationalized healthcare onslaught. According to the site SmackDown, the Independent Women's Forum is the organization that has been running a malicious ad that focuses on scaring breast cancer victims into rejecting any of President Obama's reform initiatives. The Independent Women's Forum shares its premises and resources with Americans for Prosperity. Americans for Prosperity is the organization that created Patients First and Patients United Now, groups that have been critical to disrupting the healthcare debate in an effort to sidetrack the entire process. It's interesting. These organizations that supposedly were constructed to benefit said people, said audience, that makes them up, right? They create these organizations to help breast cancer folk. They create these organizations that are intended to help, help Americans prosper. Patients United Now, groups that ultimately, ironically, antithetically, these niggas did the opposite. You disrupting healthcare. You making healthcare more harmful, less accessible to the people. But then you talking about if Obama gets into the place, the very thing that you are doing, you claim will be done. They can't do any worse than what you've already been doing. You see what I'm saying? You know, what does they say? Select the lessers of two evils or some stupid trash. Yeah. Let's continue. She is a black Tokyo Rose, making broadcasts on behalf of the enemy without even using big band swing music as part of her appeal. That Cosby would enter into an alliance with this woman is another example of how the once brilliant and trailblazing comedian is spending his twilight years as a sad clown. And then post this, he ended up supposedly incarcerated for date raping a bunch of white women. MSNBC's version of Black in America was something called About Our Children, an entertainment which featured some lines from Cosby aimed at getting laughs from the audience. He revived his Jello act in a discussion with some children. The Latino community was also represented by comedian Paul Rodriguez, who got on not only to entertain, but because he opposes bilingual education. Cosby and Rodriguez couldn't probe too deeply into the causes of American poverty because the entertainment was sponsored by one of the largest criminal operations in the country, the Bank of America. Also, Wells Fargo. Oh my gosh, two banks that ended up in major scandals and lawsuits, especially pertaining to black people. Interesting. Which is being sued by the city of Baltimore for aiming toxic loans at black neighborhoods. Oh, would you look at that? As the Washington Independent noted, lawsuits over racial discrimination and subprime lending are winding their way through the court system. Some of the allegations are nothing short of shocking. In one suit, recently classified as a class action case, Wells Fargo is accused of using loan software with discounts on rates and fees in white communities, but forbidding loan officers in minority communities from access to it. Wells Fargo received billions of dollars in taxpayers' bailout, and in October of 2009 announced a $3 billion profit. Yet the crime that the corporate-owned media concentrate on is street crime. Remember, we talked about this, that the focus becomes blue-collar crime. Instead of crime in general. If crime is so detrimental in the community, why is white-collar criminals ignored? Why are they able to just buy their way out? This is why bail reform has came into play. Because you had a bunch of people being held in pretrial detention just based solely on the fact that they couldn't pay. Now, you able to pay your bail or your bond. It doesn't change the fact that you potentially did what you are accused of. It doesn't change the fact that you are accused. It doesn't change the fact that charges has been applied to you because you are accused of some offenses. It doesn't change the fact that you even have to get dragged before a judge to rule, whether or not they're going to convict you through the court of law. But you pay some money and you evade pretrial detention. But you don't pay some money and now your broke tail sitting in that motherfucking jail, subjected to the world's most horrendous conditions because, let's be honest, jails are supposedly to house inmates for no more than 365 days. Anything over 365 days, you're to be transferred to a prison because jails are not equipped to house people longer than 365 days. But they do. They do. So, wait a minute. You see what I'm saying? My apologies, y'all. I had to make some notes. But let's continue. It's crazy how that works out, right? Actually, I want to go back and read that line again. It says, Wells Fargo received billions of dollars in taxpayers' bailout, and in October of 2009 announced a $3 billion profit. Yet the crime that the corporate-owned media concentrate on is street crime. Wonder why? Host Travis Smiley is under attack for aiding Wells Fargo in peddling these loans that have cost black homeowners billions in lost equity. Host Travis Smiley. So one of the hosts that was demonizing and condemning black people for being violent criminals was in fact involved in crime himself. To which he said he was involved with Wells Fargo in peddling the same loans that have cost many black owners millions in equity. No jail time for him. No prison time for him. None for his group either that he was linked to that did it because nigga ain't by himself. Let's continue. Now, Cosby lends his name to this operation by appearing on a show that is sponsored by Wells Fargo. If Bernard accused Wells Fargo and Bank of America, both technically individuals, of lacking personal responsibility, her face would disappear from the tube forever. Obviously, Michelle Bernard, who following her backer's script is trying to blame black men for the country's social ills, isn't too choosy about who her sponsors are. But Cosby ought to know better. Cosby wrote Counterpunch expressing annoyance with me after I wrote that he and Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. were viewing the underclass from first class. You're the bourgeoisie. The elite class of black folk looking down on the working class of black folk. I live in the ghetto, and I can assure you that the rich Negroes who got on television don't know the half of it. Many of them are professors who live all their lives in college towns, and when they travel, it's usually to visit another college town. I invited Bill Cosby to come to Oakland and sit on one of our neighborhood meetings. We finally got a period of peace on our block because one of the gang members who were terrorizing our neighbors for at least 4 years was murdered around the corner, his brother seriously wounded. They were Asian Americans, but I doubt whether CNN or MSNBC will do South Asian in America, a show devoted to the social pathologies of this growing community. Asian Americans must be cast as the model minority. And remember, the Asian hate crime bill that was heavily pushed about 6 years ago, where they were, again, perpetuating this criminality of black folk, but that it's inflicted upon Asian people. Yet here we are in 2009, Ishmael Reed talking about he lived in Oakland, where they finally received some form of peace after the gang member was badly murdered and his brother, or he was murdered and his brother was badly wounded, and they were Asian Americans. But he's right. You don't see no content being pushed on Asians because they're the poster child. They're the tokens. They're the ones who they want everybody to be after. The model minority. The purpose of this, according to the great Chinese American writer Frank Chin, is to embarrass blacks. But a toxic house, a criminal operation, still flourishes in the neighborhood because of the power of a landlord, an absentee landlord, who has defied the city's attempts to shut down her property. The police tells us that because of the power of landlords who rent their property or allow their abandoned property to fester with criminal operations, they are helpless to do anything about the problem. Skip and Cos. These landlords who are aiding and abetting criminal operations in neighborhoods like mine are probably from two-parent households and won't be covered by the Disney Channel's upcoming Smear of the City. Surely won't. They love demonizing single-parent households and impoverished backgrounds, not multi-family households, two-parent households with affluent, financial backgrounds. In entertainment, all about Oakland's gang violence without acknowledging that under Ron Dullums, a black mayor and a new black police chief, crime is down. The Cosby Bernard Show included a town hall, a cheap way to get ratings, a device which relies on panelists and audience members competing with each other over who can come up with the best applause lines. These verbal shootouts are guaranteed to raise the revenue of CNN and MSNBC, but I doubt whether the panelists get paid. They do it for free like in the old plantation days. It's all about entertainment, advertising to promote CNN's Second Black in America. Soledad O'Brien, in a carnival tone, like one of the guys whose job is to stand outside of strip clubs on North Beach in San Francisco, attempting to lure tourists to sex shows. Promised the viewers you won't be able to tear yourself away from this one. On the morning of September 14, I was watching CNN's headline news version of attracting ratings near the double A gate at JFK Airport in New York. In succession, there were stories about Serena Williams' tantrum at the U.S. Open, Kanye West going off on Taylor Swift at an award ceremony, and your obligatory black sexual predator, the usual sideshow manner by which blacks are shown on the tube. It's fitting that white pundits and other writers consult comedians like Bill Cosby and Chris Rock for their insights about black culture because traditionally, the media have treated blacks as comic relief. Hollywood, which in November presented blacks with yet another neo-Nazi incest film called Precious, has been in the business for over 100 years. You would think that white American novelists and playwrights would oppose the current atmosphere that has raised fears that President Obama will meet the same fate as JFK. The details of whose murder are still being held a secret by the CIA. Instead, novelists like Tom Wolfe and Philip Roth promote against minority men in Nazi Germany's media, and worse than that from Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh. Both Saul Bellow and Philip Roth have depicted black men as flashers, which was the common manner by which Jewish men in the Nazi press were shown. David Mamet lent his name to a repellent racist movie called Edmund, in which two black sexual predators appear. The sexual predator being the typical manner by which the Nazi publications like Der Angriff portrayed minority males. His predators, one is a pimp, the other a rapist, are even worse than the one served by the D.W. Griffith. Whether Mamet knows it, in the late Andrew MacDonald's The Turner Diaries, the Ultra-Rights Bible, and the book that inspired Timothy McVeigh of the Oklahoma Federal Building, Jewish men are the pimps, black men are the rapists. Another reader was Richard Poplawski, who murdered 3 Pittsburgh policemen last April 4th, 2008. While cable uses Bill Cosby and Paul Rodriguez to comment on black and Hispanic issues, comedian Chris Rock is Mamet's guide to Black America, and he quoted Chris Rock in his vapid, self-serving Times op-ed, an advertisement for his forthcoming play called Race. I've never seen an op-ed in the Times written by the great living black playwrights like Adrian Kennedy, Amiri Baraka, and Ed Bullins. In his op-ed, Mamet quoted Chris Rock's comment on Reverend Jeremiah Wright. He said, "You cannot find a 70-year-old black man who does not hate the whites." If Rock said that, he is ignorant and is susceptible to the cartoonish view of Reverend Jeremiah Wright offered by the media. Do you think that Reverend Wright hated the white members of his congregation? Of Rock's silly observation, Mamet wrote, "This made sense to me." It only made sense to Mamet because he wanted it to make sense. Even given the hard time that whites have been given the Jews since ancient times, does Mamet believe that all Jewish 70-year-old men hate Gentiles? Or is it just 70-year-old black men who hate whites uniformly? Who all think the same way? Mamet also wrote, "Most contemporary debate on race is nothing but sanctimony. Efforts at exploitation and efforts at restitution seeking equally to enlarge and prolong dissent and rancor." Mamet doesn't know anything about most contemporary debates on race because the hundreds of black intellectuals, scholars, writers, poets, etc., who know something about the topic are kept off stage by a media that has a thing about cerebral blacks and offers only those who serve the interests of the media owners like Miss Bernard, Larry Elder, Joe Watkins, Amy Holmes, Bob Christie, and John McWhorter, a puppet for the Manhattan Institute, which supports eugenics research. Such is the power of the Institute, which gets money from places like Chase Manhattan Bank, that on Sunday, September 20th, the Associated Press gave McWhorter the lead in an article about President Carter's accusation that some of the vitriol aimed at President Obama is based upon race. Another way that the far right manipulates public discussions affecting blacks through puppets like McWhorter and Bernard. Does Mamet read Panopticon Review or Black Renaissance Noir or The Black Agenda or The Final Call or even Ebony and Essence, The Root, Black Scholar, or the Amsterdam News? Has he ever heard of Bell Hooks, Michelle Wallace, Adolph Reed Jr., Gerald Early, Daryl Pinckney, Cecil Brown, Sonia Sanchez, J.J. Phillips, Bob Steptoe, Catherine Takara, Jill Nelson, Elizabeth Nunez, Thulani Davis, Quincy Trope, Eugene Redmond, Adrian Kennedy, Herb Boyd, Ed Bullins, Jerry Ward, Houston Baker Jr., Ethelbert Miller, Askia Torre, Askia Muhammad, Keith Gilliard, Bernard Bell, Greg Tate, Justin Domingos, Trisha Rose, Clyde Taylor, Kalamu Ya Salam, Joyce, Eugene Redmond, Reginald Martin, Al Young, etc.? Probably not, my friend. Probably not. And as an example of how ignorance reaches the highest segments of American intellectual life in a racist society, Mamet has fallen for the media hoax that affirmative action is a black program, when for Rabbi Michael Lerner, quoted in Time and the late Seymour Lipset, quoted in a book called The Broken Alliance, The Turbulent Times Between Blacks and Jews in America by Jonathan Kaufman, it benefits Jewish women the most. Kaufman writes, he predicted that the great beneficiaries of affirmative action would be Jewish women. In fact, Lipset turned out to be right. My view is that the purpose of Mamet's op-ed was an attempt to do a preemptive strike on black critics who will probably find his play race as racist as the piece of dreck to which he lent his name, Edmund, which as it turned out closed soon after it opened. Langston Hughes complained the most of the plays written about black life during the 1930s, which were written by whites. Nothing has changed. Richard Price has made so much money creating blackface dialogue that he is moving to Harlem. Jimmy Carter doesn't have to undergo an identity makeover like Price in order to know about blacks, nor does he have to make brief forays into the ghetto, which is how Price says that he gathered his material, like someone on a safari. Carter is a Southerner. After Jimmy Carter made an accurate assessment of the racist response to the election of a black president, all-day cable shows featuring mostly all-white panels weighed in on the former president's remarks. Predictably, many dismissed him as a doddering fool, except for Roland Martin. Most of the black faces had to tone down their comments. Only Larry Elder of the black right was allowed to get livid over Carter's remarks. Later, they jumped on Nancy Pelosi for telling it like it is. She said that the current atmosphere of political pornography drummed up by people like Glenn Beck's boss, Rupert Murdoch, and his Beelzebub, Willie Horton mastermind, Roger Ailes, reminded her of the hateful atmosphere that led to the assassinations of Harvey Milk and George Moscone, a liberal who was on his way to becoming governor of California. Now, this is the first time I heard of Roger Ailes, who had anything to do with Willie Horton. So highlight that page because we coming back to that. The others were too timid to call a viral white supremacy that has infected thousands of birthers, deathers, teabaggers, and armed miscellaneous crazies as a result of Barack Obama's election for what it is, a public mental health crisis. The fact that many educated whites in the media deny Carter's claim might be seen as part of the crisis. Talking about inmates running the asylum. George Wills, appearing on This Week, said that those who saw racism in the nutty 9/12 demonstrations were guilty of liberal McCarthyism. Will once said, following the line promoted by McWhorter's Manhattan Institute, that blacks were intellectually inferior to whites. I even had a white dude tell me that when I was in the Marine Corps. This white dude named Hunt. Talking about something. He acknowledged that black people have street smarts, but he don't believe that black people had book smarts. Mind you, this was coming from a dude who had less than a 2.7 GPA. And he was saying this to me, a person who had over a 3.2 GPA, final GPA, graduated high school. I had a 4.0 GPA at least once, my high school life. Been on honor roll damn near my entire life. Was inducted to the National Honor Society. Was a black scholar due to education. You see what I'm saying? Academia was my thing. Secondly, was sports. And this was coming from a white boy with what many would compare to my education would be subpar. But he said that black people were intellectually inferior to white people. I'm black. You're white. I don't seem intellectually inferior to you, so how can you come to that conclusion? Interesting. Let's continue. Let's continue. Let's continue. Okay. Anyways. Oh, Jesus. Where do we live off, Lord? Oh, yeah. Talk about inmates running the asylum. George Wills, appearing on This Week, said that those who saw racism in the nutty 9/12 demonstrations were guilty of liberal McCarthyism. Will once said that blacks were intellectually inferior to whites. As usual, Irish Americans were represented on this panel by a right-winger. This time, Peggy Noonan, a woman, as a bluesman might say, ice water for blood. She doesn't seem to mind that 45,000 people will die each year from lack of health care, according to a Harvard study. She's against big government. Without big government, millions of Irish Americans will never have entered the middle class. Despite the ugly, racist mood of the crowd, it's always your own, right? Despite the ugly, racist mood of the crowd, they came to Washington on September 12, 2009. Some of them displaying signs that depicted Obama as a communist, a witch doctor with a bone in his nose, designed by Fox News expert Dr. David McCallop, or as someone who belongs in a zoo, as a monkey or someone who should be killed. David Brooks said that the demonstration had nothing to do with race. Yet they're always criticizing Iranians for ignoring facts. Here's a man who gets quoted as though he is Solomon. He wasn't the only one. A steady stream of white politicians, pundits, and their African-American tokens like Zambia-born Amy Holmes denied that race had anything to do with the ugly display against President Obama during the Fox and insurance industry sponsored 9/12 March on Washington. Neocon David Brooks doesn't understand why many blacks won't assimilate, a process that has worked for him. His mentor is the late Irving Kristol, who rose to power by scapegoating blacks for all the country's social ills and associating them with welfare, the Great Society programs, and affirmative action when the largest group to receive the advantages of these programs have been whites. Well. Look at here. Interesting. Taking my notes, y'all. Give me a second. Now let's continue. Crystal became a consultant for the Bradley Foundation, one of those think tanks that finances quack studies about black inferiority. He even got all cozy with backwoods Christian fundamentalists, even though they believe that Jews must convert before Jesus comes down from out of the sky. His friend Norman Podhoretz also used this formula to make it, criticizing black family values, a hypocrite, according to Theodore Solotaroff. Podhoretz's colleague at Commentary, Podhoretz was a real party animal. He was no longer the spokesman of our sober, mature look, whose wistful suggestion for acting up was a midnight plunge in the Plaza Hotel fountain. No, that Norman was history. In the past year or two, he teamed up with Norman Mailer, the lead rebel, iconoclast, and sensualist, Norman Mailer, the lead rebel, iconoclast, and sensualist of the New York scene. The result was a hard-drinking, sexually liberated Norman who didn't seem to spend many evenings at home. Interesting. It's interesting. These be the people that be trying to teach you about motherfucking family values. Nigga, you spreading your seed every which way but loose. Okay? Solotaroff says that Podhoretz's wife, Midge Decter, a woman who has spent years making a career of criticizing unmarried black mothers, made a pass at him. Like Michelle Bernard chastising black males instead of some of the corporate malefactors who sponsor her shows, the neocon operation founded by Podhoretz and others serve the purpose of redirecting attention from the criminal behavior of corporations, the money behind the neocons, to the bad habits of the so-called black underclass. The corporate-owned media use the same strategy. Yes, them nigga do. All right, guys. Let me see how many pages we got left. Okay. Okay, not so bad, not so bad. We got 8 pages left after I get through this one. Y'all, thank y'all for your patience and bearing with me, man, because I know this is a long and tough read, especially for the people who don't have, the mental capacity to sit and focus right now. I get it. We live in a world of shorts and motherfucking reels, and so the attention span is reduced to a bare minimum. Some of y'all holding on by threads. I thank y'all. Okay, I thank you. The news media spent a week running footage showing a black student beating up a white student on a school bus. But 3 recent cases where white thugs murdered Hispanics and got off virtually ignored. During the same period, the police and the media, which always take their side, accused some black and Hispanic youth of gang rape. Later, it was discovered that the rape victim had lied and that the police had jumped the gun, which is typical of how the police treat black and brown suspects. In the same week, a white man suspected of killing an Asian American woman at Yale was permitted to go home, and after he was arrested, the media showed pictures of him behaving like an altar boy and brought on friends of who vouched for his character. Howard Kurtz, a so-called media critic and an MS alumni who has had it in for Obama ever since he announced his candidacy, spent Sunday, September 20, on Serena and Kanye for laughs, but hasn't commented about the media silence regarding the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, which agreed to pay $2.3 billion to settle civil and criminal allegations that it had illegally marketed its painkiller Bextra, which has been withdrawn. It's interesting. The same Pfizer that was in charge of the COVID vaccination in 2020, less than 15 years later. Interesting. It was the largest healthcare fraud settlement and the largest criminal fine of any kind ever. So restrictive is the latitude, according to David Gregory, by his corporate bosses, that when Senator Joseph Lieberman appeared on Meet the Press November 22nd, he failed to point out that Lieberman, who was on the show to oppose the health bill, receives millions from the insurance industry. Nor did he utter a word about Bank of America, another criminal operation and sponsor of Bill Cosby and Michelle Bernard's entertainment that covered up $3.6 billion paid out in bonuses when it purchased Merrill Lynch. Unbridled capitalism and their media hirelings make chumps of millions of whites by entertaining them with the antics of OJ, Serena, Kanye West, Chris Brown, the sole U.S. domestic abuser, and Michael Vick, so as to divert attention from their crimes. Businesses ought to put OJ and them on salary. MSNBC's criticism of Obama's mild healthcare reforms makes sense when you realize that General Electric, which owns NBC, sells health insurance, and Joe Scarborough, one of Obama's harshest critics, is just another salesman to them. So they sell health insurance, but then they anti-public funded health care. See the conflict of interest? During the same period that corporate criminality was unveiled, the media jumped on Acorn, the Association of Community Organizations of Reform Now, an organization that serves the poor and registers black and Hispanic voters to the consternation of the Republican Party and its media allies. Acorn warned of the foreclosure crisis. I listened to some ignorant poor and middle-class whites call the Washington Journal to complain about Acorn, a few whose workers were entrapped by a conservative sting operation. The employees who fell for this sting should have been fired for falling for the idea that a conservative nerd was a pimp. In the case of the woman, I would also have been duped. She carried on like someone who had been turning tricks for years, bringing to her role the kind of zeal we've come to expect from wingnuts. I guess that Ann Coulter wasn't available. The fact that Acorn lost over $50 million as a result of her performance make her the most expensive play acting whore in history. These whites complain about big government, but today, for big businesses that treat them like dirt, poison their food, over-medicates their children, hypnotizes them with the Barney's principle so that they buy things that they don't need, and send their jobs abroad. Instead of fighting those who view them as serfs, they travel all the way to Washington from places like South Carolina to call Barack Obama a monkey. If South Carolina secedes again, which it always threatening to do, would the country fight another war to pursue or to persuade a state that still thinks of itself as Scotland to return to the fold? I don't think so. The Times ombudsman wrote a piece about how the liberal news media in its own newspaper were tardy in picking up on the Acorn scandal, which was uncovered by the vast right-wing media conspiracy, which was on Acorn like a bloodhound. I'd like to see the ombudsman report on why the media, both liberal and conservative, almost hid another Bank of America scandal. In December 2008, a federal jury in Manhattan found Bank of America's liable in securities fraud trial that centered on the sales of asset-backed securities and involved some of the biggest names on Wall Street. Interesting. Let me wet my whistle. Mm-hmm. All right. In a verdict delivered late Thursday after nearly 6 weeks of trial, the jury ordered Bank of America to pay more than $141 million to a dozen institutional plaintiffs, including the American International Group, Allstate, Societe Generale, Travelers, Bank Leumi, Bairsure, Lanes Bank, and the International Finance Corporation. The money includes interest that Bank of America, the nation's largest bank, is obligated by law to pay on the $101 million award, which did not include punitive damages. On September 29, 2009, the San Francisco Chronicle reported that Bank of America suspended its work with the Acorn Group. Bank of America and Acorn have been working together on mortgage foreclosure issues. Bank of America severed ties with the group after GOP Representative Spencer Backus of Alabama, Darrell Issa of California, and Lamar Smith of Texas sent a letter to 14 banks requesting disclosure to the House Financial Service Committee of all financial arrangements with Acorn and its subsidiaries or affiliates. The Republicans are trying to intimidate banks that have stepped up to help stop the foreclosure crisis, said Acorn Chief Executive Bertha Lewis. These same Republicans ignored Acorn's warnings about predatory lending and the foreclosure crisis, then gave Wall Street free rein and now obstructing efforts to help families. You can't make this stuff up. The stuff that Republicans make up. In this land of white supremacists make-believe where Ayn Rand, the crank addict, is a goddess and Sarah Palin is the moose queen, 50% of Republicans believe that Acorn stole the election for Obama. Yet while I was sitting in the airport watching a newswoman dressed like a hooker by the sinister men who pay her bills, I wasn't feeling as cranky as sometimes. As a matter of fact, I was optimistic for once. During the previous 2 weeks, I had just witnessed 2 young people, one of whom is my daughter, demonstrate that books and theater, the arts, are still effective means by which those who are excluded from the airwaves can respond to those who monopolize the airwaves and who wish to distract from the excesses and greed of their class by pitting group against group and race against race and parading people like Michael Vick, Chris Brown, Whitney Houston, and OJ before the cameras, your old Puritan ducking stools with lenses. Wow, the news media defined blacks with a series of hoax and stunts. Their representations of Muslims are reminiscent of the early 19th century Barbary pirates days. So where does one find the points of view so where does one find the point of view of those who are being discussed? How do they find themselves? Black, Latinos, and others don't have a fairness doctrine that would enable them to counter the 24/7 demagoguery aimed at raising anger ratings against their groups and even hate crimes. Playwright Wajahat Ali, a Pakistani American playwright, with his play The Domestic Crusaders, offered audiences at the New York, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Nuyorican, Nuyorican Poets Cafe, a view of Pakistani Muslim American family that challenges those by a media that portray Muslim men as terrorists and Muslim women as courtesans. One could witness the joy and relief. They love painting racial minority women as some motherfucking mistress, some side piece, something that you could just court up on. One could witness the joy and relief of members of the Southeast Asian audience grown weary of such portrayals. They are attending sold-out performances and rewarding the playwright director, Carla Blank, the actors and crew with standing ovations. With a tiny budget of no more than $30,000, we got to view South Asian life not from a hack television or a Hollywood script writer or an interlocutor like David Mamet, but from a brilliant writer whose play, The Domestic Crusaders, scores a direct hit on not only on the stereotypes accorded to Muslims by the media, but challenges the points of view of those tokens chosen to interpret Muslim life for mainstream. I'm gonna look for this. I wanna watch this. What is it called? The Domestic Crusader. I'm gonna come back to that because I'm gonna watch it. Got $30,000 funding and made such a great movie. Is outstanding. The Domestic Crusaders scores a direct hit on not only on the stereotypes accorded to Muslims by the media, but challenges the points of view of those tokens chosen to interpret Muslim life for the mainstream. Fareed Zakaria, who encouraged the Bush administration to attack Iraq, might be an expert on the Middle East for the men who owns the media, but when some lines from the play described him as such, this audience, made up mostly of young intellectual Southeast Asians, laughed. The play drew standing room only crowds and received standing ovations wherever it was performed on the West Coast. The same thing is happening at the Nuyorican, where the play ran through October 11th. Was the play's appeal limited to an ethnic audience? Not hardly. Actress Vinnie Burrows, the great African-American diva, loved it. She said that it reminded her of Lorraine Hansberry, A Raisin in the Sun, one of the dramas that inspired Ali, along with O'Neill's play about an Irish-American family, A Long Day's Journey into Night, as well as Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman. Two black men, one of whom saw the play in the West, and a Nuyorican audience member said that the family on the stage could be their families. I'm going to watch all these. Give me a second, please, my people. I mean, I've seen a Raisin in the Sun, but I don't mind that. Inspired O'Neill's play about an Irish family. A Long Day's Journey into Night. Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman. Okay. Movies. My dog is all hanging out in the hallway like a weirdo. The play was produced by two African Americans, Rome Neal and myself, directed by a Jewish American, Carla Blank, and performed at the landmark Puerto Rican Theater. In addition, two members of American literature's royal families are part of a crew filming the production for a forthcoming documentary. The documentary producer is Ford Morrison, Tony's son, and James Baldwin's nephew, Tajan Khalifa Smart, is operating first camera. The director is a young black woman named Tanisha Berg. Watching these young people, Southeast Asian, Hispanic, black, and young white scenic artist Rusty Zimmerman, a collaborator on this project, was refreshing. In the 1960s, Manhattan was black and white. The black artists and intellectuals weren't speaking to whites, and the whites were always scrambling around to include a token black on their guest list. And he said this is in the 1960s. So you got these weirdos who like to push this false narrative that there was all this intermingling and intermixing in the 50s and the 60s amongst black and white people, which ended up with this shared culture. So this is how you end up with all these culture white people. And it's like, no, nigga, if y'all look at y'all, look at it. Look at it. Cultural appropriation is what got these non-black people with black culture attributes, okay? Culture appropriating. And there ain't no mixing and mingling, nothing. This man said it. In Manhattan, New York City, one of the progressive, democratic locations ever. In the 1960s, Manhattan was black and white. The black artists and intellectuals weren't speaking to whites, and the whites were always scrambling around to include a token black, which means they was looking for one to add to their guest lists. Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all. During her book tour of the East, Tennessee Reed did not reach the thousands that Wajahat reached with his challenge to old myths about Muslims. Excuse me, y'all. One's not only encouraged by the media, but by academia. The play was covered by Al Jazeera, MSNBC, or Jazeera, Al Jazeera, MSNBC, the New York Times, and the Today Show, and the Wall Street Journal. The only dissenter was the Village Voice neocon critic Alexis Solosky, which objected to lines that criticized the Bush administration, which Solosky, to my knowledge, ski with an I, is Polish. Counterpunch contributor Wajahat Ali has been at it longer, and the effort he made to get his play done east of the Rockies took a lot of energy and resources. He doesn't sleep, and while writing plays, he has to support himself part-time as a lawyer. Nevertheless, Tennessee's East Coast bookstore appearances drew a lot of fans, and one bookstore appearance was broadcast at a later date by C-SPAN. Those who showed up for her readings were startled by Tennessee's inside look at how learning disabled and black students are treated by American education. God, Jesus, that's a whole topic in itself. For example, I noticed some jaw dropping among some jaded New Yorkers when Tennessee recounted how the Oakland public school system and the University of California at Berkeley introduced students to African civilizations. What is happening? For example, I noticed some jaw dropping among some jaded New Yorkers when Tennessee recounted how the Oakland public system and the University of California at Berkeley introduced students to African civilization using Tarzan movies, and how Reconstruction is taught from the point of view of Gone with the Wind. Heads also turned when she reported that some white teachers and professors award white students higher grades than blacks and Hispanics, even though the quality of their work might be the same, or in the case of the whites, inferior to that of black and Hispanics. That's a pervasive issue in the college higher education realm. Okay, I'm just saying. There's a program called CSTEP, and I'm gonna actually show y'all so y'all niggas ain't know I ain't lying. Let me see where I left off. Okay, I know where I left off. There's a program. Okay, let me pop y'all over here. Okay, it's called CSTEP. I'm gonna show y'all what CSTEP is. New York, because it's not applicable everywhere. Collegiate Science and Technology Entry Program, right? This is a program. Let me get out of the way. But this is a program that is applied in New York State, and it usually helps disenfranchised groups gain access to resources that they wouldn't normally have, right? So it says purpose. Say increase the number of economically disadvantaged students and others who are pursuing professional licensure and careers in mathematics, science, technology, and health-related fields, right? And then for a list of these professions, you click this, bang, 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 bang. Okay. And then they give you a list of licenses, renew, all that wonderful jazz, right? And then the programs provides academic enrichment and research experiment in STEM content areas. The projects includes supervised training and research methods, graduate, professional, and school admissions preparation, standardized tests, preparations, academic and career development. But this is what I want y'all to see about her. Eligibility. Okay. You just got to be a New York State resident, economically disadvantaged and or in need of or would greatly benefit from academic enrichment or support in the STEM areas to be determined locally. Eligibility criteria. Look, it tells you your eligible income. Okay? So you could see for yourself. Okay? I'm going to move me out of the way. And then you add 10 grand each additional person in excess of 8. Most people would consider this type of income not a lot, right? You in the household, this is your income. Now, they claim this is over the years. When I benefited from this, it was prior to 2022. The whole point of me showing y'all this is because it's the whole fact that when I was in this program, right? When I was in this program in 2019, 2020, okay, I was one of, 2 black people in there. It was me and one other girl. I think it might have been a black dude too. But it was me, another female black student, and I think a black male student. Everybody else in there was white or white adjacent. And a lot of people falsely believe, they attribute welfare and all types of welfare type programs and handouts to black people. Stuff like this would be considered a welfare type program because it's helping poor people get in here. Who pays for this? Tax dollars pay for this. Economically disadvantaged. This don't say black. Okay? This don't say black. So when it's like this, it's not discriminatory to nobody specifically. Who the freak you think about to fill up these spaces? When you look at the demographics of colleges, it's predominantly colored people that's in these colleges. It's predominantly colored people in these colleges. That's a whole face lie. I misspoke. It's predominantly white people in these colleges. Or white adjacent folk. So when you see stuff like this, economically disadvantaged, and y'all be sitting here trying to say it be black people that disproportionately benefit off of welfare and affirmative action and all this other stuff, all these DEI programs, all these programs that help poor people and disenfranchised people and people that ain't gonna get a leg up, baby, this don't say nothing about us. And then when you look at the demographics, when you look at the data points around these different institutions, these different fields, you'll see it's predominantly white people that makes them up. So if it's white people that make them up, how can it be disproportionately black people that's on welfare and stuff, that's using affirmative action? The ignorant won't realize that it's actually white people who benefit from affirmative action and welfare. But I digress. Let's continue. They seem startled by stories about how some teachers humiliate learning disabled students in front of their classmates. This information comes on the heels of a report that learning disabled are those who are most likely to receive punishment in the nation's school. Cuban, Puerto Rican, and Peruvian American students accorded her enthusiastic applause at Miami-Dade College when it was reported that when she ran for Oakland School Board, she was the only candidate who insisted that black and Hispanic students received the same treatment as those white students living in the affluent areas of Oakland. As a result of her visit to Miami, she was invited to Miami Book Fair, and in October she returned to New York to address the Girls Club and students at Brooklyn's Boricua College. Her appearance prompted this poignant response from a young listener. Though her composition skills are flawed, her sentiment originates in the heart, and her paying attention to a young writer who shares her background and experience demonstrate once again that young people are inspired by such literature, which is still ignored by the education establishment except for one or two tokens. The establishment's idea of education is to convert students to the ways of the white man. Zoe's letter. Excuse me. Howdy, this is Zoe coming to you from Girls Club. Today was really cool as always. Yesterday, Renee said that an author was coming to the club to talk about a book. I honestly didn't care to attend and listen to a writer because I'm not much of a writer. Actually, I rarely read for fun. I tend to read only if it's for school. But surprisingly, I had a really good time, and now this experience has changed my perspective on a lot of things. So who's this author that blessed me with her presence? Tennessee Reed is her name, and she is the author of her intriguing book entitled Spell Albuquerque, Memoir of a Difficult Student. While discussing her work of art, Miss Reed was so laid back and relaxed, and it felt as if I was just talking to my friend. So what makes Miss Reed and her book so special? Well, at an early age, she was diagnosed with several language-based learning disorders. There's some typos in this young lady's letter. Thus, one would believe that the odds are against her. How can an individual with so many disorders write an interesting book? Ms. Reed stated it took a lot of support. Her mother, Carla Blank, and her father, a publisher, Ishmael Reed, were Miss Reed's rock. Like any caring parent, they did her homework, as Miss Reed likes to say about how to care and support their comely child. School was difficult for Ms. Reed. Nevertheless, she made it through grad school and even fought an education system that often defined her disabilities as laziness or stupidity. With all the negative things in her life, she still did what she loves to do. This leaves me with my final words. If you put your heart and mind to it, despite all odds, you can do anything. Signing off. Posted by Zoe on November 7, 2009 under Girlville. That was dope. Bill Cosby has been very critical of young people, and in my letter replying to him, I said that he was acting like an old coot. I'm one too. In fact, the title of my new novel is Coots, which my agent says that American publishers won't touch because one or two of the characters present scientific evidence to support the acquittal of O.J. Simpson in the criminal trial. But even I, who have been called a sourpuss by one blogger, felt good about what I had seen during my 3-week visit to the East. A cooperation between young people of different backgrounds, working together to challenge those slanders pushed by the media, and in Mamet's case, by film and mainstream theater as well. I was feeling all gooey. Like, what's that line about lighting one little candle? These young people in Wajahat's crew in Tennessee did much to shine a light on bigotry and ignorance, and Bill Cosby should see this show and use his power to insist that it get a wider audience. I was impressed by the energy of those kids, South Asian, black and white, joining forces to invite an audience into the home of a South Asian American household, of a family beset by issues that we all have experienced. And a young writer who overcame a teacher's diagnosis that she would never learn to read or write through a present from beat poet Ted Jones, who found her scholastic records 45 reads per minute or rate per minute RPM of authors Rubinstein's orchestral composition to Three Billy Goats Gruff in a flea market. She had a book with almost the same text, so she figured out how to read along. That was the breakthrough. She knows that the kind of caring support system that was available to her tutors, understanding teachers, is denied millions of the nation's children. who are dumped into special education classes, misdiagnosed and misunderstood. Amen to that. I remember all the days that Tennessee came home in tears over the way she was treated by teachers and classmates who dismissed her as lazy, slow, and difficult. This lazy, slow, and difficult student had produced 3 books by the time she reached college, after we were told that her learning disability was so severe that she would never read nor write. Her book, Spell Albuquerque, published by AK Press, positions her to advocate for students like her. I would like to mention that there's a privilege that this young lady has, being the daughter of Mr. Ishmael Reed, having the connections that he has. It did give her a leg up. However, it's not to knock the feats that she had to go through to achieve what she's achieved, which is to basically show these people that despite the diagnosis that y'all rendered me, I can excel, I can achieve. I just would like to put it out there. If you are a person who have similar learning disabilities to Miss Reed here, don't beat yourself up when your journey takes you along a path that seems to be prolonged, okay? Because your journey ain't the same as her. You don't have the same connections as her. You don't have the same parents as her. You see what I'm saying? And even she said, like, you know, she had access to caring support system, tutors, caring teachers, parents. Everybody don't have that. Everybody don't have that. So keep that in mind when you find yourself comparing where you currently are to other people, because I'm telling you, it's inaccurate. But anyways, let's continue. And so I sat there in the airport watching a woman present Black Americans like one would present a carnival act. I wasn't fuming as usual. The airport was teeming with armed soldiers because, as I was to learn later, President Obama was about to visit New York. Observing those soldiers, I thought that the teabagger nut who threatened to return to Washington armed would have had a hard time getting next to the president. The pilot said that we'd have to taxi out to a remote part of the airport because the airport had been shut down because the president's plane was arriving. Shortly afterward, I saw out the right window Air Force One land. I regretted that my stepfather didn't live to see this. He was the kind of Black man who doesn't show up on television or isn't discussed by Michelle Bernard. Like millions of Black men, Benny S. Reed reported to the same job, Chevrolet plant in Buffalo, New York, for over 30 years. He swallowed his pride as the permanent affirmative action, which is awarded to white males, permitted those who were less qualified than him to become foreman. Toward the end of his working days, they finally offered him the job. Give it to my sons, he said, referring to my half-brother who followed him into the automobile industry. He would have been oppressed by JFK being shut down because a Black man was coming to town. I can see him now flashing that great grin of his. I mean, hey, Obama making president was a great achievement for many Black people, for those who perceive him as Black. You know, even in my ignorance state, I gave unnecessary adulation to Obama because I praised him solely because of the fact that he was pushed to me as a Black person, and I began to perceive him as a Black person, and I didn't even care about his merit, didn't care what his plans were for the world or for the United States, let alone for the world. Didn't care. And so I blindly supported him for being Black, and that nigga wreaked havoc on the Black community as well as America as a whole and the world as a whole. And lives have been lost due to some wars that he motherfreaking catapulted as well. So at my big age of 33, almost 34, I have come to the understanding that all skin folk ain't your kinfolk, and you shouldn't blindly follow people just because they may hold similar attributes or features or characteristics that you hold, because at the end of the day, God can use a donkey, he can use a horse, he can use a child to talk to adult humans. Baby, The good Lord can use anybody, and it doesn't matter what your status is, doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter how much assets you've accumulated or lack thereof. Jesus can bring deliverance from a homeless indigent, okay? Just saying. The Lord can use anybody. So with that being said, I take the words of others with a grain of salt. I appreciate Mr. Reed for this great read. I don't agree with every perspective he presents. And there's some that's like, buddy, I'm on that bandwagon with you. But that's the wonderful thing about reading, stepping outside of your comfort zone, right? You get to figure out who you are through reading. Do I agree with these ideas? Do I not? Why? And then you start to figure out who the freak you are and why you think the way you think. Step outside your comfort zone, okay? I encourage y'all to step outside your comfort zone. But I appreciate y'all, all those who stopped in with me and watched this live. And I also appreciate those who come back after the fact and watch this, play out. I will break this up, maybe not in its complete segment, but I will take what I've found to be very